Welcome, everyone, to the L7C podcast. Today, we have a very special episode for you all today. Today, making her return, we have Dr. Kassie Lowery. How are you doing today, ma'am?
I'm doing just great.
Oh, that was just great, Martin. Okay, great.
What would you like me to say?
Oh, no, that was, a little bit more enthusiasm, but it's okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll work on that enthusiasm for you there, Martin.
But it is great to have you back. You had your very first episode on the L7C podcast, March 16th, 2021, of CrossFit and feminism. And a lot of people liked that episode. So we are happy to finally have you back.
Well, I'm happy to be back.
And this episode was actually inspired by you, since this month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And you said that we should have a mental health awareness podcast. And you were so gracious enough to volunteer to talk about mental health.
Yeah, and I think that mental health is something that we're getting a lot better about discussing, but it still has to be strong stigma. It's hard for people to always be totally open about it. So I think to definitely continue talking about.
So first, Kassie, what is mental health?
So I think people think about mental health in terms of diagnoses or just in terms of when your mental health isn't great. But mental health is really just your psychological functioning. So how you navigate the day from the brain standpoint, which can actually affect a lot of your physical manifestation of how stress and things like that carry out. So I mean, mental health is your emotional and your mental states, rather than just this idea that in order to have mental health, you have to have something wrong with your mental health.
So then why is mental health important? Why is this month so important with mental health?
So I think a big thing, the reason that this month's so important for mental health is like I said, a lot of people see it as stigmatizing. We have a lot of difficulties talking about depression, anxiety, things like that. Everybody feels sad, everybody feels anxious, but there are people out there that are actually struggling with this a lot more than most people. And what will shock you is probably the fact that there are lots of people who have diagnoses of depression or anxiety and just don't talk about it, because we see physical health, especially kind of in the United States, as being something that, okay, well, you have a broken arm, let's go to the doctor and get it taken care of. Mental health wise, though, we just see it as pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get over it, just don't worry about it. You hear that a lot when people say that they're anxious. Well, just stop worrying about it, and then it should be fine. But the reality is lots of people don't have the coping skills that they actually need when those things get to an abnormal level. And there are a lot of people that actually don't know that they even meet those thresholds for being more anxious or more depressed than other people. So they're both feelings that we have a lot of, but when they get to the point where they're impacting your everyday life, that's when we need to get even more serious about it.
And you hinted on this when you were just talking about the people saying just get over it. So why is there a stigma around mental health? Why do people think it doesn't exist? Is it because of different generations? Why is there a stigma around if someone says I'm working on my mental health, and then people think that person is then soft?
Well, thing is we have ways to measure. If you have a broken bone, we go ahead and we can put a cast in your broken bone, right? You go to the doctor, nobody's going to question if you go to the doctor and there's something that you can physically see. The problem is when we talk about mental health, it's more ambiguous, I think, than most people like to deal with. There are definitely measures that help us kind of figure that out, but a lot of times what we get taught, especially when you're younger, especially little boys, is, well, just get over it. You should be able to cope with these things. But the problem is a lot of the time, if you don't necessarily have the best representation for how to get over those things or how to cope with them in a meaningful way, you get looked at you're not doing the work, or you are just being sensitive, or XYZ. You can insert any number of quotes into that, and it's frustrating to watch kids kind of feel like they can't cry and things like that. And then as adults, we push these things down, and then we get frustrated with each other because our feelings manifest, and then we're like, well, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I should just get over it. So I mean, mental health is just a lot harder to like manage in terms of like the eye, because we see it as something that you should just be able to like fix yourself. Which isn't the case. Like there are lots of people, even psychologists, that go to get other people to help them because that outside perspective helps.
So then I guess with mental health, then like from a professional standpoint, when people become adults, why are there's a lot of insurances that don't have like mental health as something they cover? Is that ever going to change, or is that going to stay the same? Like what's going to push these insurances to like, if someone wants to get their mental health checked, like what's going to push them to do that?
Well, I think having conversations like this is really going to help us like point people down that path. The other thing that a lot of people, I think, and I think insurance is starting to figure this out a lot slower than I think any of us would ever like, but there is this what we call a mind-body connection. So lots of times we talk about our mental health in terms of, well, what's going on in your brain. We talk about your physical health in terms of what's going on with your body. Your brain lives in your body. They don't get to be separated. There's something called somatization, which I can never say correctly, so I apologize for that. But it's really like your body will physically manifest stress if you're not taking care of it in the correct way. Like people will have things like conversion disorder, they'll have stomach aches, headaches, because you're stressed out, not because there's anything like biologically necessarily like this a trigger, but your brain is stressed out, so then it stresses the rest of your body out, and then that actually causes physical manifestations. And I think as we start to realize like going down this path of prevention medicine rather than reactive medicine, which is where we're kind of more at right now, and we're slowly moving towards that idea of, well, if we just fix the problem before it happens, we spend a lot less in insurance, whereas the way that our system's set up right now is, well, we're not going to worry so much about your mental health until it's causing a physical problem. But the reality is if we take care of the mental health problem, it's going to cost a lot less than having to send you through a bunch of MRIs and things like that are also just impacting your body. And that's not to say that like lots of people will hear that and think, oh, well, it's just all in my head. And that's not really what that means. It means literally that your body has chemicals in it, especially your brain, such as like cortisol, that will actually like physically change the way that your body is reacting to different things. So it's not something you can control. Like it's something that we can give you the right coping skills. It's like counseling is like medicine. Medicine will take you to a certain point, but it's actually shown to rewire the brain if you go through therapy and you go through intervention-based treatment or research-based treatment.
So with mental health also, like if someone feels like they're having issues mental health wise, like what are the first steps that they should take? Like is it one size fits all dealing with mental health? Is it just therapy, or do people have other ways to cope with it, like sports, or like how does one like go about the steps of getting their mental health treated in the right way, per se, like with the medicine? Like,
yeah, so I think that's a big question. And the reality is it's a huge spectrum. So everything in mental health can really be a large spectrum. Some people can take some medication and it's fine, and it takes care of like what little edge like needs to be taken off or what big edge does. Some people prefer to do just therapy, and that kind of helps them in the way that they need to. There are other people who manage it through eating right and working out and doing like things that they know help them. I would say that if you don't know where to start, or if you feel like you're not getting anywhere, that's a time to go talk to a therapist, to a psychologist. And it might be that you can just start counseling. It might be that we go into a full evaluation and figure out really what's going on. Because that's the other thing is mental health can look like a lot of different things. Lots of people will come in and think that they have like ADHD, which is a pretty like common term for most people. There's about 10% of like the population in general is diagnosed with ADHD. But the thing is if you're depressed or you're anxious, first thing that goes is your attention. So that tends to be one of those things that getting a full evaluation and being able to understand kind of like really what's going on, rather than just kind of like saying, oh, I'm having a hard time paying attention, here's some ADHD medication. We want to be mindful of that and make sure that we've actually got the root cause correct, because they can look the same in terms of symptoms, but you don't want to put somebody who's anxious on ADHD medication because it's basically just going to make the anxiety worse. And our goal as like professionals is to make sure that we're getting you placed on the correct path, so we can get you to the best results, to be the best you that you can be as fast as we can. So I mean, in all honesty, like any time that you're exercising, we recommend a lot of times that you should exercise to the point where you're getting like at least 30 minutes of a sweat in a day, because it releases endorphins that help with the body and the mind. Sleep is also a huge one. So making sure that you get enough sleep for your body. Everybody's different. There are some people who need just 8 hours, or some people who need like 9 hours. And that just kind of varies, and it can change, especially as kids turn into teenagers and then into adults.
Kassie, is there any other important things that people should know about mental health? Like, are there resources where they could look up online, or any other like lasting, like important things that you think people should know about like mental health?
Yeah, I mean, in all honesty, I think that there's a lot of good resources online. I wouldn't necessarily pinpoint like one over another. If you're going to look into things like that, though, I would recommend making sure that you're looking at like a .org or a .edu or a medical site that you know is backed by like a hospital or something like that. Somebody where you know who is giving the information has the credibility to do it. I also think that one of the biggest things that we can do for everybody's mental health is having conversations about mental health and not making it awkward. I think it's really hard for a lot of us in life to just be able to say like, hey, like, this is something I'm going through, and be careful about like how you validate that person. Like, people just need to know like they're not alone, and that's kind of the biggest part of mental health, is we've all kind of siloed ourselves in this way that we deal with it on our own because it's our own personal issue and it's nobody else's. We don't want to burden anybody else, and that's really not the best way to do it. And it might not be that you talk to your friends about it, but if you need somebody and you don't feel like you have that person to talk to, talking to people that are professionally trained like therapists is always a good first step. And I think that as you get to that point where you work through some of those things, a therapist can really bring out like blind spots and things to help you feel more comfortable with, well, why did this develop? How do I deal with it? What do I do in order to like help myself feel better? Because they're an outside perspective and they're trained to do this. Like that's what they chose to do. And I think it's also really important to be open and honest with your therapist, because a lot of us, I think, still go into a therapist's office and think, I don't want my therapist to judge me. Guarantee you your therapist has heard something worse way before they met you. It'll be okay, and they're just going to be there to kind of guide you through it.
Well said. Kassie, any shout outs, anything that you want to say before we close off this podcast for today?
I just really appreciate the fact that we're talking about mental health more. And I think that's something, again, like I think just talk about it. Check on your friends. People are often really good at hiding when they're sad or when they're depressed or anxious. And I think it's really important for us to like make those extra efforts to check in on the people that we love.
You couldn't say it. I couldn't say it any better myself. No, great end. With that being said, thank you, Dr. Kassie Lowery, for being on the L7C podcast once again. Thank you, everyone who listens to the L7C podcast. At the time of listening to this, we're still probably on our road to 2K, or we just broke that thing. So whichever time this comes out, it should be out in October, since October is Mental Health Awareness Month. Make sure you like, rate, comment, subscribe on anything that you listen to. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Radio Public, all of that. And with that being said, thank you everyone for listening to L7C Podcast. You guys take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the L7C Podcast. Be sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to the channel. Follow us on all social media platforms, and we'll be talking to you guys soon. Take care.